In a small village bordered by vast fields and dense forests, there lived an orchard widow named Eliza. Years ago, she had been known as a joyful wife and mother, her laughter echoing through the trees. But a devastating tragedy had taken her family from her, leaving her heartbroken and alone. Despite her sorrow, Eliza's courage shone brightly as she tended to her beloved orchard, which was the last remnant of the happiness she once knew. Her trees blossomed with sweet, juicy apples that glimmered in the sunlight like tiny jewels. The villagers often whispered about her late at night, recalling the tales of her kindness. Many said she shared her fruit freely with anyone in need, welcoming friends and weary travelers to rest under the shade of her trees. They would sit together and listen to stories about happier days. However, as time passed, fear began to loom over the village. The apple trees, once symbols of hope and hospitality, soon became objects of suspicion. Whispers spread like wildfire about how the orchard widow's apples might be cursed, a sign of witchcraft that spread illness among people. Despite this darkening shadow over her life, Eliza continued to offer kindness wherever she could. Eliza's orchard was a breathtaking sight, bursting with life and color. Rows of apple trees swayed gently in the breeze, their branches heavy with bright red and golden fruits. In spring, the trees were adorned with delicate white blossoms that filled the air with a sweet fragrance, drawing in bees and butterflies. As summer approached, the apples grew plump and shiny, ripening under the warm sun. Many travelers and scouts from nearby villages were drawn to her orchard, often stopping to rest beneath the shade of her sprawling trees. They would marvel at the beauty surrounding them, enjoying the peaceful sounds of nature, the rustling leaves and chirping birds. Eliza welcomed everyone with open arms, offering her freshly picked apples to anyone who looked hungry or weary. The scouts often shared tales of their adventures while they snacked on the delicious fruit, their laughter mingling with the soft rustle of the leaves. The orchard became a place of refuge for those in need, a sanctuary where Eliza's generosity shone brightly. Little did they know that this haven would soon face dark clouds of suspicion, threatening the very essence of what made it special. As the days turned into weeks, a mysterious illness began to creep through the village. It started with a cough here and a fever there, but soon many of the villagers were falling ill. Panic set in as loved ones suffered, leaving families worried and desperate for answers. Whispers of a curse spread like wildfire, tainting the once joyous atmosphere of the village. The settlers gathered in anxious clusters, their faces drawn and fearful. They pointed fingers, searching for someone or something to blame. It wasn't long before Eliza's orchard became the focus of their fears. The villagers recalled how her apples had been offered to weary travelers and scouts, and they began to speak of witch apples, fruits that could carry dark magic and sickness. Rumors twisted around Eliza's kind nature, turning her generosity into something sinister. Eliza sensed the growing tension in the air but remained hopeful that her neighbors would see the truth amid their fears. However, with each passing day, the dread grew deeper. She knew that her beloved orchard was at risk, caught in a storm of suspicion that threatened to consume everything she held dear. The villagers' fear of the illness was deeply rooted in their superstitions, passed down through generations. Stories of witches and dark magic had long haunted their community, shaping their beliefs and fears. They spoke of women with mysterious knowledge who roamed the woods at night, brewing potions and casting spells. These tales created a sense of dread that often turned innocent actions into accusations. Eliza's solitary life only fueled their imaginations. Living alone in her orchard, she fit the image of the witch they had come to fear in their folklore. As illness spread, the villagers recalled stories from their childhood about how witches could poison crops or bring sickness upon a community. Suddenly, Eliza's once welcoming apple trees became symbols of danger rather than comfort. In hushed tones, they began to suggest that Eliza must be using her apples for dark purposes, perhaps even to harm those who were sick. The more frightened they became, the easier it was to dismiss her kindness as something wicked. The warmth she had shown them faded into whispers of suspicion, framing her as a target for all their fears rather than a neighbor in need of understanding. One chilly afternoon, as the sun began to set behind the distant hills, a weary scout named Thomas wandered into Eliza's orchard. He had been lost for days while exploring the nearby woods, and hunger gnawed at his stomach like a wild beast. With each step, he felt weaker, his energy fading faster than the daylight. Just when he thought he might collapse, the sight of Eliza's vibrant apple trees filled him with hope. As he stumbled through the rows of trees, Thomas marveled at the apples glistening in the fading light. The sweet scent filled the air, invigorating his tired body. He approached one of the trees and reached up to pluck a shiny apple, its skin smooth and inviting. As he took a bite, the juice dripped down his chin, and he sighed in relief. It was the most delicious fruit he had ever tasted. Unbeknownst to Thomas, whispers of suspicion surrounded Eliza's orchard. But at that moment, all he could think about was satisfying his hunger and finding shelter. Little did he know that this chance encounter would soon become part of a much larger story, one that would intertwine his fate with Eliza's and challenge the fears that gripped their village. As Thomas savored the sweet apple, he looked up to see Eliza approaching with a warm smile. Her gentle demeanor instantly put him at ease, and he felt as if he had found a friendly companion amid his struggles. "Welcome, young traveler. You look as if you've seen a hard journey," she said, her voice filled with concern. He nodded, grateful for her kindness. Eliza quickly gathered more apples and offered them to him, encouraging him to eat as much as he needed. While they sat beneath the shade of an old tree, Thomas shared his story of getting lost in the woods and the growing fear of illness that plagued his village. Eliza listened intently, her heart aching for his plight. In return, she spoke of her own experiences, how she had once shared her orchard's bounty with many and how the whispers of suspicion hurt her deeply. Their conversation flowed easily, creating a bond forged through shared tales of hardship and resilience. For Thomas, Eliza's kindness was a bright light in a world darkened by fear. Little did either of them realize that this meeting would soon spark a chain of events that would challenge both their lives and the beliefs of the village around them. As they sat beneath the shade of the old tree, Thomas took a deep breath and decided to share the news that weighed heavily on his heart. "Eliza, I must tell you about the plague that has spread through our village. It's causing pain and fear among everyone," he said, his voice tinged with worry. Eliza listened intently, her brow furrowing as he described how entire families were falling ill and how panic gripped the hearts of the villagers. "They're searching for someone to blame, and they pointed their fingers at your apples," he continued, knowing how much it hurt her to hear this. As they spoke, Eliza began to understand the full extent of the fear that had taken hold of her neighbors. It was not just about her orchard, it was about their shared humanity, about how fear can twist relationships and turn kindness into suspicion. "I never wanted to be a target," Eliza confessed softly, "I just wanted to help." Thomas nodded, recognizing that their struggles connected them in ways deeper than mere circumstance. In that moment, they formed a bond not only of friendship but also of empathy, two souls facing a world filled with fear and misunderstanding, yet still yearning for hope and understanding amid the darkness. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting an eerie glow over the village, a meeting of worried settlers took place in the town square. Fear and frustration had reached a boiling point. With whispers of illness still swirling, the villagers decided that drastic action was needed. They could no longer allow Eliza's orchard to be a source of their anxiety. Fueled by superstition and anger, they made a terrible decision: they would burn down her trees. Under the cover of darkness, a group of villagers gathered torches and pitchforks, their faces set with determination. They marched towards Eliza's orchard, hearts heavy but convinced they were protecting their families from danger. The night air was thick with tension as they reached the edge of the orchard, illuminated by flickering flames as they ignited their torches. From her cottage, Eliza heard the distant crackling and saw shadows moving among her beloved trees. Panic gripped her heart as she rushed outside, realizing what was unfolding. "No. Please don't," she cried, but her pleas echoed back to her in the stillness of the night. As fire consumed her orchard, she felt not just the loss of her trees but also the shattering of her hopes and dreams, leaving behind nothing but ash and despair. As the last flames flickered out, Eliza stood in the charred remains of her orchard, her heart aching with an unbearable sorrow. The once thriving trees that had provided her with companionship and solace now lay reduced to ashes, their sweet apples and vibrant leaves forever lost. A heavy weight settled on her chest as she felt not only the loss of her beloved trees but also a profound sense of abandonment by the very community she had once embraced. Eliza had always been there to lend a helping hand, sharing her fruit and stories with anyone in need. Yet, in this moment of despair, she realized that the villagers had turned against her without understanding her true nature. The accusations of witchcraft and malice stung deeply, leaving her feeling isolated and betrayed. As tears streamed down her cheeks, she could hear the soft whispers of memories echoing in the silence, the laughter of children playing among her trees, travelers sharing tales under their shade. Now, all that remained were memories intertwined with pain. Eliza felt as if a part of herself had been stripped away, leaving behind an emptiness that would be hard to fill. In that solitude, she pondered how fear could twist hearts and minds, leaving kindness in ruins. Determined to defend Eliza and honor the kindness she had shown him, Thomas made his way back to the village. The whispers of fear still floated through the air, but this time he would not stand by in silence. He gathered a few brave friends who had admired Eliza's generosity and shared his experience with her. With fire in his heart, Thomas stood before the villagers as they gathered, faces grim with worry. "What happened to Eliza was wrong," he exclaimed, drawing their attention. "She fed me when I was lost and starving. Her apples did not bring illness, they brought hope. It is our fear that led us to destroy something beautiful." Some villagers shifted uneasily, contemplating his words. He continued passionately, painting a picture of Eliza's warm heart and the laughter that had once filled her orchard. "We are better than this. We cannot allow our fears to twist our hearts and minds into scapegoating an innocent woman." His plea resonated with a few who began to murmur their agreement. Slowly, a change began to ripple through the crowd as Thomas's courage sparked a light of understanding. Perhaps it was time for the villagers to confront their fears and remember the true spirit of compassion that once defined their community. As the crowd began to stir, an intense confrontation unfolded. A man named Edward, who had led the charge to destroy Eliza's orchard, stepped forward, his face flushed with anger. "You are siding with a woman who brought misery to us all. We suffered because of her witch apples," he shouted, his voice dripping with condescension. Thomas stood firm, refusing to back down. "No, Edward. Eliza did not bring this plague, our own fears did." He gestured toward the anxious faces in the crowd. "Look around you. It is prejudice that has festered in our hearts. She offered us kindness, and we returned it with hate. Is this truly who we are?" The villagers exchanged uncertain glances as murmurs rippled through the group. Some nodded in agreement with Thomas, others remained entrenched in their fear. "What if your words are just a trick?" another villager called out, her voice quavering with doubt. "That's exactly how fear works," Thomas replied urgently. "It tricks us into believing lies. We cannot keep allowing shadows of suspicion to guide our actions, let's choose understanding over fear." Gradually, the air shifted as people began to realize that their worries had blinded them from seeing Eliza as a neighbor rather than a threat. The confrontation opened a path for honest dialogue towards healing and understanding. In the days that followed the confrontation, a profound change began to take root in the village. The air, once thick with fear and suspicion, started to clear as villagers gathered in small groups to share their stories and experiences. They reflected on the actions that led to the destruction of Eliza's orchard, acknowledging how their deep-seated fears had blinded them to the truth. Eliza, with determination and an open heart, began to engage with her neighbors again. She welcomed them to her cottage, inviting them to talk, share, and even reminisce about the memories tied to her once vibrant orchard. Slowly, walls of distrust began to crumble as they learned about her kindness, her losses, and the love she held for each tree that had been burned. As the villagers opened up about their fears, their worries over illness and uncertainty, they found comfort in knowing they were not alone. Kindness emerged as a powerful remedy, weaving through the community like a gentle breeze. One by one, they came to understand that acceptance could heal old wounds, allowing Eliza to be seen not as a threat but as a fellow human being deserving of compassion. In embracing their shared humanity, the village stepped toward a brighter future united by understanding and kindness.